Today, President Obama criticized Republicans harshly for not compromising on his tax hikes and a debt deal. But what about that? What his base that won't compromise on spending cuts? Labor unions are lobbying hard against any cuts to Social Security that they say are unacceptable, warning that Democrats will suffer politically should the entitlement program see any of its funding slashed. And Nancy Pelosi is on record as saying no cuts to any federal programs. Here now to discuss are my freedom fighters, Fox Business anchor and my colleague Liz Claman. Carl Jeffers, Democratic analyst, usually in Los Angeles, and here in the studio today. And Jacob Hornberger, Future of Freedom Foundation founder and president. Carl, to you first. Everybody acknowledges that after another generation, Social Security doesn't have the money. It's not sustainable financially. Shouldn't we do something about it now?
Well, we should do something about it now in the context of saving it for the future, but we don't have to do something about it now in the context of getting the debt ceiling raised. The debt ceiling should have been and can still be an independent action separate from either cuts or revenue enhancements.
You think that Republicans who elected the Tea Party folks, swearing that they would never increase the debt, will cave on this at this moment in time and under this microscope?
Is it caving, though, if there's a compromise? I think that a black and white decision is really not the way this country works. You've got to have some type of compromise. However, and I love you, Carl, but I really think that you do eventually have to look at this Social Security issue and deal with it. And by simply saying can't touch any social programs, it's not going to work.
What is the value, Jacob Hornberger, of having a debt ceiling if every time the government needs more money, the Congress just raises the ceiling and the government just goes out and borrows more? And that's how we find ourselves with $14.3 trillion that costs us $440 billion a year in interest payments alone.
Well, if you're going to have a ceiling that you're going to raise every time it comes due, then it's no ceiling at all. It's just a fraud on the American people. We all know what they're going to do when this debt ceiling's raised, Judge. They're going to do the same thing they've done every time the debt ceiling has been reached. They're going to go out and spend and borrow and add more debt onto the backs of the American people. I say let's bring it to a head right now. Let's let this thing stay intact. Let them decide what they're going to do to live within their means, which is the tax revenues that are coming in.
Coming back to Social Security, earlier today, Richard Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO, a good friend of the president, he visited the White House 59 times in 2009, called his friend in the White House, the president, delusional because the president leaked that he might be considering raising the age for Medicare and Social Security from 65 to 67. Does the president stand in danger of losing his Democratic base if he negotiates on something like Social Security or Medicare with the Republicans?
Well, I think that the president has a good chance, better than perhaps any other president, to maintain his base even if he makes sacrifices like that. The fact is, Judge, I've said on Fox here that when I was asked directly, well, Carl, what can we do? And my first response is we need to raise the retirement age, but exempt everybody who's over 35. And that would actually help to straighten it out and still exempt all the seniors in Florida.
What would Wall Street's reaction be if the retirement age were raised, Liz Claman?
I'm not sure they would care. In fact, I think they would look at that as part of the compromise, and it's part of at least a healing, an effort to fix this wound that is all of the spending that's going on. But again, compromise, Judge, you've got one side saying absolutely not and another side saying absolutely not. Let's just get together.
If any Republicans vote to raise taxes, Jacob Hornberger, do you think they'll be looking for new jobs when their terms expire?
Well, they will be and they should be. And they've broken their word. When you give your word, you ought to stand by it. This country doesn't need new taxes, Judge. It needs a paradigm examination as to what this welfare warfare state has done to our country.
If Social Security is doomed to fail without raising taxes or without changing eligibility, what should we do?
Well, I don't think it's doomed to fail.
Well, statistically, it's doomed to fail. The money isn't there. Well, there aren't that many babies being born to feed the people that are in the system now when they retire.
Well, first of all, if you wind up cutting it now, then you will have taxes raised because that means the Democrats will win a landslide in the next election, and that's what Republicans are worried about. Listen, this was a great opportunity for Republicans, Judge. Of the deficit reductions that Boehner and the president agreed on, of every $1, 15 cents was coming from tax increases and 85 cents was coming from cuts.
But you know that any Republican that votes for tax increases will be looking for work.
Any Republican right now who votes to cut Social Security and entitlements will be looking for work and there won't be any.
That's what the polls show. Carl is right.
Good argument, Carl. Changing subjects. Despite today's drop, crude oil prices remain up in the weeks after the federal government announced it would release 30.6 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserves, the largest release in history, in an international effort to drive down oil prices. The White House has said it would consider releasing more if prices don't budge. Do the markets need more government-sponsored supply, or is it finally time to let the free market speak for itself, Carl Jeffer?
Well, when it comes to the issue of the oil market,
you know I love you, pal.
I hope so. I hope so. This kind of love could carry us a long ways, Judge.
Don't get carried away.
But when the free market, in this case, works its sort of necessary evil, if you will, because prices will go up when supplies and demands changes. I agree that the free market should be allowed to work its magic in sense.
I'm happy to hear that. Are you surprised that prices did not go down when they announced, not when they released? I don't even know if it's in the marketplace yet, but just when they announced.
They went down for 2 days. This just goes to show that government and organizations like the International Energy Agency are irrelevant. They are not relevant anymore. The free market has become such a behemoth, so massive, that when they start to move, it gets crushed. Everybody gets crushed, including governments.
Maybe we're all on the same page, Jacob Hornberger. Shouldn't the basic laws of supply and demand determine what the price of oil is and not the heavy thumb of the government?
Well, absolutely, but the heavy thumb of government thinks it's heavy enough to repeal the laws of supply and demand. But we all see what interventionism does. It sends chaos into the markets. The price system sends signals to people as to, if it's too high, conserve if you're a consumer, supply if you're a producer. The government jumps into the market, intervenes, and distorts all that price system. It's the worst thing that can happen.
Doesn't the government, Liz Claman, have an inflated view of its own importance? Stated differently, 30 million gallons is a drop in the bucket. It's almost nothing compared to the annual consumption of oil year.
It equaled about 8 hours of consumption for the world. I mean, it was really not very much. For a while, the price did fall about 5%. But again, it just goes to show you cannot manipulate or morph by doing those short-term efforts.
Why did the president do this? This isn't Katrina. Prices aren't that bad. There's no emergency. There's no catastrophe. Did he think that he could control the price of oil, of gasoline, in the summer driving season?
No, I think what the president thought was that he needed to do something to get the American people to perceive that he was out in front on an issue that they could see the results of day in and day out.
Even if it was a facade that had no actual effect. It made it look like he was doing something.
We've had that happen before. Presidents do that. First of all, the whole issue of the president affecting the economy. As we know, oftentimes it's a facade. But if the economy's good, whoever's president gets credit. If it's bad, whoever's president gets blamed.
All right,
so you have to be out in front of the perception.
We can say an amen to that. Jacob Hornberger, Carl Jeffer, Liz Claman, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for coming all the way from Los Angeles, back with what the president wants and what he can get in these debt negotiations. Next.